XDAO people and everyone who watching us right now. Today I'm here and this is Sean O'Brien. He's a steward of Buy the Broncos DAO, and today we will know more about Buy the Broncos DAO, what they do, and why it's so interesting for us as a use case for XDAO and the NFL team members also. So Sean, how are you?
I'm well. How are you guys doing? I know it's not an ideal time for everybody, so I appreciate folks who are willing to join, and hopefully this is really interesting, and hopefully it's beneficial to everybody who's on. So thank you so much, Anna. Great to see you.
Yes, so I will start immediately to the questions that we prepared with our team. So basically, yes. And the first question is just in a very simple terms, can you describe what is Buy the Broncos DAO, how it will work, like in general question, like in general sentence, what is Buy the
Sure.
Broncos DAO?
Yeah, if it's okay, I'll start really high at the Denver Broncos themselves and the current search situation for their sale, and then get into the Buy the Broncos DAO more specifically. Is that okay? Does that work?
Yes,
Okay,
yes, perfectly.
great. Awesome. So to start with the Broncos, for those who may or may not be familiar, the Denver Broncos are a professional football team in the NFL here in the United States. For those of us who live in the area that are fans of the Broncos, we're called Broncos Country, and it's made up and comprised of primarily the Mountain West states, so Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, Montana, parts of Nevada, some of the Dakotas, and all sorts of other places. And so the Broncos were owned by a gentleman named Pat Bolin. Pat Bolin passed away a few years ago, and not to get too deep into the weeds, but the net was that when he passed, the ownership of the Denver Broncos, the structure became somewhat complicated amongst his family members. And I just saw "Go Broncos" quote, so or post. So yes, um, and the net is that now the Broncos as an asset are for sale in an estate sale. So it is not a sale of traditional situation where there's a living member or living owner, excuse me, but rather it is an estate sale. And as some people may or may not be familiar with an estate sale, typically the way that it goes down is that the highest bidder wins the right to own that asset. So if you've ever seen, where like maybe an older person passes and they sell the belongings in their home in an estate sale, the Denver Broncos, being a much more valuable asset than what you keep in your home, is going for sale in up for sale in like manner. And so we knew that that was going to happen. Excuse me, quite some time ago. It became fairly apparent that the Broncos were going to go into this type of situation when it comes to the sale process for a while. And so we started with the idea many months ago that we need to utilize a DAO to try to own and or acquire the Broncos on behalf of the fans and the players, right? One thing that people oftentimes forget is that in the NFL Constitution and bylaws, which are the governing documents that help the NFL as an association operate and the respective teams that operate underneath the rubric of the NFL does allow for players and coaches to be owners of the team that they play for or coach. And so in this circumstance, we are working with a number of, and we will make this public here in the near future, a number of current players and former Broncos players, including a few Super Bowl 50 winners, who are also going to be part of this DAO, because we view this as not only a way for fans to become owners, but also for players to become owners. The big important thing in our mind is that fans are the lifeblood of the team. We're the ones who keep the lights on, so to speak, and the players are the ones who break their backs on behalf of the team, and so they should be rewarded and no longer treated as commodities, so to speak. And so those are the two big things. I know that's a long answer. Hopefully that was helpful, Anna. But Buy the Broncos DAO is essentially an effort. Sorry, one of my dogs is going crazy. I'll take care of it in a second. But an effort for ownership to be put in the hands of the fans and the players.
Yes, it's Okay, okay. Dogs. Yes, this.
Sorry, I have four dogs. It's a crazy. They run my life. Unfortunately, sorry about that, Anna. I
Are
apologize
they,
sincerely.
are they big or small one? Small
Uh,
dogs.
three small, one big.
Okay.
Too many. No matter how big or small, too many. Four is too many.
Yes, perfect. So yes, it was very interesting to learn what about the Broncos in general and why you decided to do it. And the second question is, how do you gather and encourage people to join Buy the Broncos?
That's a great question. So if it's okay, I'll start at the top from our, when we initially announced our intent. Um, yeah, so that's two labs, man. Yeah, crazy. They probably knock everything over with their tails. Um, when we announced our intent, we got a lot of great publicity, thankfully, to a number of people who were very much willing to hear us out, right? Because when you hear something of this magnitude in the outset, it's a very difficult pill to swallow, right? Because it is a lot of money potentially, and it's going to take a lot of effort. And you have a number of factors in place that are challenges. Our main factors, aside from the financial aspect, are one, the NFL itself and what they do or do not approve of when it comes to ownership structure. And to the extent that it's interesting or beneficial, we can absolutely go into the details there. But the other side is the regulatory and compliance side of things, especially here in the United States. The United States, in the form of the SEC and other regulatory and governing bodies, is fairly strict and possibly one of the strictest in the world. And so making sure that we comply with the SEC and regulatory requirements to do this in an ethical and honest and forthright way was one of the biggest considerations. And so having that discussion with the folks who initially reported and broke the news about our effort was very, very helpful. Now to answer your question more directly, and we can get into to the extent that it's beneficial near the end, or if people have questions about the regulatory side of things, I'm happy to talk about that and how we're setting ourselves up legally as an entity. But now to get your question, how do we garner interest? One, I think the fact that the Broncos are one of the most beloved teams in the NFL is helps us out, frankly, right? As a member of Broncos country myself, right? We have, I think, one of the largest geographical footprints, as I mentioned earlier, when it comes to our fan base, and we're loyal, and so having the opportunity to own our own piece of dirt, so to speak, in the form of ownership of the Denver Broncos is really helpful. But in addition to that, what we'll be doing the next few weeks in coordination with XDAO is releasing a number of what we believe very, very important partnerships that we've forged with, again, current players in the Broncos organization, former players, as well as a number of other professional athletes and I guess what you consider influencers, but folks of that nature. And so we think that that will help a lot of folks learn more about the DAO through the network and social media reach that all of these other members of the DAO have. So that's our big, I guess, effort in the next few weeks, especially as we're getting ready to go live here with XDAO in the actual raise. Getting the word out is imperative, and so to the extent that people on this bridge, are willing and able to help us spread the word, we obviously want to make sure that folks are, recognized for their efforts. And so please, it sounds like you guys are doing POAPs for this call, which is amazing, and that's the same sort of effort that we look at. So if people want to get involved, our DMs are open. So hit us up on Twitter or on Discord. And to the extent that that there's interest or just curiosity, please let's get you guys involved. Thanks for the question, Anna. Hopefully that answers it.
Yes, but basically, from my perspective, the idea of buying like a team is it's not just a marketing story, but in fact, even me, for example, I'm like a little bit far from a sport in general, but especially when it comes to NFL, it's something that very popular in USA, and this is a good options, the good opportunity, first of all, to spread the word this idea, because
Mhm.
DAO like borderless, and this is very interesting. And for sure, it's much easier to do something big together. And yes, so
Yeah, and to that point, not to take up too much time on this, but it's no secret that the NFL is dominant in the United States. On any given year, 8 out of the 10 most watched television programs in the U.S. will be NFL games typically. So the NFL has an extremely high level of market penetration here in our country. However, they don't have as much market penetration with the youth, and they certainly don't have as much market penetration outside of our borders, right? You can drive a few miles south or a few miles north, and for the most part, depending on where you go, right, you really lose almost all NFL loyalties and things like that. Yeah, that someone just mentioned, right? The idea is teaming up to bring Web3 to the NFL, because we look at Web3 as the great equalizer, right? At the end of the day, Web3, in my opinion, this is my personal opinion, is about ownership and collective ownership. And
yes,
and
sorry.
the DAO. Go
Yes,
ahead.
and this is basically was the second question.
Oh,
I
I
mean
want I
the
want to
next
answer. Okay, then I won't
question.
go in.
So you
Oh,
can continue, because yes, what I am going to ask, why you choose DAO basically. So you can tell about this
okay,
choose
sorry.
part.
My bad, Anna. I apologize. I'm so sorry. But yeah, we look at it from an NFL's perspective, or from the Broncos perspective. This is the ultimate way to extend your international fan base in as short a time period as possible, with an extremely loyal group, Web3, who are not only extremely savvy, but they're looking for these types of opportunities, because again, this is something, at least in the United States, is very uncommon, right? Fan ownership exists in European football in some instances, right? Germany has the 50+1 rule and things like that. So it's less common, or it's more common there. But here in our country, where our leagues are essentially state-sanctioned monopolies, you don't have that type of ownership structure. But we believe that through a DAO, you can not only do it in an ethical way, but you can do it in a way that is compliant with regulatory requirements, and you can do it in a way that expands it way beyond your geographic footprint, right? Where you can have a global fan base that makes the Broncos immediately the most the most popular NFL team overnight in the world, right? And amongst youth and amongst the international population, people are going to have a much higher degree of interest in the league if they have a piece of it, if they have the ability to have an ownership stake in it. So yeah, that's one of the main reasons. The other reason is, you know, not to get too philosophical, but over time, typically moneyed interests have been the only groups who have the ability to participate in this type of ownership structure, whether it's a sports team or an entity or a corporation, until that corporation or entity goes public. And as I'm sure folks on this call have, seen time and time again, by the time a company goes public, it's already had multiple seed rounds. It's had other types of investment opportunities that have been exclusively limited to accredited investors, who typically means they have $1 million liquid or more. And so we look at this and say it's time for that same type of ownership structure and opportunity to exist amongst the masses, right? And the DAO is the tool, in our opinion, that allows for that to happen. And I mentioned a couple of moments ago, from a regulatory and compliance side, we are pairing the DAO in a legal form with a cooperative model. So typically S corps, C corps, LLCs, and some of these other more familiar business structures, they are essentially a triangle. They are hierarchical in nature. There's nothing wrong with it, but they exist to concentrate wealth at the top and oftentimes extract that wealth. And they exist to concentrate power at the top, right? A legal cooperative does not do that. A legal cooperative is set up, one, all of its members meaning people who are involved in the cooperative are legally deemed members, they have a vote. So just like a DAO, members of a cooperative have a voice and voting rights. In addition, a cooperative is decentralized and it is essentially democratized in terms of its ownership structure. So it's a flattened ownership structure, and it exists to recycle the profits, if there are any, back into the membership. So, for example, there is a cooperative here in the United States called REI. I'm a member. You can see there's some gear over my shoulder. I'm a gearhead, and so I buy a bunch of stuff that I probably don't need, but I buy it from REI. And as a member of the cooperative, at the end of the year, I receive 10% back of all of my spend, and that's how they reward me for being a member. That's their dividend, and that is not subject to SEC and securities laws, because as a member, I actually have a hand proactively in providing what's called patronage. And this patronage is essentially saying that me as a member, I help the cooperative succeed. And since I help it succeed, I'm able to reap or avail myself of the financial benefits from the successful operation of that cooperative. And so we look at a DAO and say, that's basically what a DAO is, just a DAO operates on Web3. So we have said the DAO is the engine, the power that makes this happen. The cooperative is the legal structure. Let's marry the two. And by doing so, and if we obviously do it in the right way, we give everybody a vote. So it's one wallet, one vote. And we allow for people, if there is a profit, again, we cannot guarantee such, but if there is a profit, you are able to then recycle that profit back to the membership. And the members of the DAO, aka the cooperative, receive the financial benefit rather than the money just going to, some rich group or individual, and it just disappears into thin air. And I saw there's a question mentioned this, but will the league allow a DAO to purchase the team? I can actually address that if that's okay. That came from, where did that come from? Saturn. It came from Saturn. Is that right? Here's the answer. The NFL has what's called the Constitution and bylaws, which is the legal structure that operates and provides for the input on how the association, the NFL, functions. And in the Constitution and bylaws, it's a 293-page document. It has everything from ownership structures to TV licensing rights, et cetera, et cetera. And the way that they exist is that there are 5 ownership structures that the NFL will allow. One is an independently wealthy individual. One is a corporation. One is an association. One is a partnership. And the last is one they call an other entity. As a for-profit cooperative, we are in that 5th bucket. We are an other entity. And so when you hear about some of the limitations when it comes to ownership within the NFL, whether they intend it or not, they explicitly provide those strict limitations to corporations, partnerships, and LLCs. We as a legal cooperative, we are none of those 3 legal entities. And so we fall into that 5th other entity bucket. By default, that means that we have, there's section 3 of the NFL Constitution bylaws governs kind of ownership structure and things like that. And in that section, there are no specific limitations with respect to another entity or a cooperative. And so when you hear, in theory, for those of the folks who are super involved with the NFL and things like that, the limitations of, like, for example, there's one section that says only 25 people or fewer can be part owners of a specific team, but that is explicitly limited to partnerships. So we don't have to abide by that limitation because it is for partnerships only. There is a 30% rule with respect to one individual must own 30% of the consortium. That is specifically applied to corporations, LLCs, and partnerships. And so we actually don't have to abide by that because it doesn't explicitly limit other entities or cooperatives to those sorts of ownership structure rules and regulations. And so that question is great, but at the same time, the other benefit we think in the current system with the Broncos is that the Broncos being a sale through an estate means that whoever is the highest bidder legally, short of some sort of complexities, but typically the highest bidder legally owns the asset. And so our hope is being a part of, or being the highest bidder exclusively, or being a part of a group that buys the Broncos, we are able to acquire the asset and navigate those difficult waters with the NFL in the way that is as upfront and responsible as possible. hopefully that helps. If there's a follow-up question, I'm just trying to read
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
notes or the chats, and then there's another question of what's the minimum amount needed to participate in the DAO? Great question. Should I handle that, Anna, or did you want to ask a question first?
Actually, we can move to the chat and everything that is asking here just later in the end of AMA. But for now, I just noted that it's very interesting how you dive and how much time you took to study the legal part, the legal subject, because basically what we have been seeing like in 1 year ago, for example, it was just every DAO was created just for fun,
Just go.
and
Yeah.
this is what is changed. So after we seen the crash of the market, after any crash, after any like bearish market, we understood that we need to do it more like in legal part, and that is very important for. It's very cool. It's very cool, and
Yeah.
so
Well,
yeah.
I paid too much for these dumb degrees on the wall, if you see them in the background there. So we have to rely on, we have a really good legal team. I come from a legal background myself, but I admittedly have to default to the subject matter experts on securities. And we have a very, very competent group that helps out on that front, because to your point, it's absolutely vital that we do it in a responsible way. We think for three reasons. One, because we're dealing with people's contributions, and we have to be responsible there. And if we can talk about it later on, but if we fail, right, we have a plan for dealing with that. Two, we have to be responsible to the Denver Broncos in general, and the fans in particular, because if this has even a small degree of success, right, we have to make sure that we frankly honor the team that has existed since 1960, right, and making sure that they stay healthy, and any portion that we're able to acquire, that we fulfill our part as a partial owner. And the third thing is we look at it as a responsibility to other DAOs who come after us, right? Our hope is using this legal cooperative structure in Colorado. Um, people can look at it, and people who are much smarter than me, people who are much more creative than me, like you, Anna, right? And can say, hey, if they did it in this way, we're going to do the exact same thing, but for X or for Y or for Z. And it hopefully creates a pathway through which a lot of other DAOs can be successful in their respective endeavors.
Yeah, so that is important. Is just impressive how big impact you can finally give for the people, for the community, for the Web3 space. And the second question, I know that you trying to purchase the real Salt Lake, and so it failed, as I know. And
Yeah, it did fail.
what lessons have you learned, and what the changes in your approach of the project it was implemented?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is a lot. And so I'm happy to go through that. So Real Salt Lake, as quick background, is a professional soccer football team, association football here in the United States, based out of Salt Lake City, in the MLS. And when we first started with that idea, again, we knew the Broncos were coming at some point down the road, because Mr. Bolin, he did pass quite some time ago. Um, but in that interim, Real Salt Lake, which is also here in the Rocky Mountain region, Rocky Mountain West, they went up for sale for some really weird circumstances. But nonetheless, we started having discussions about that, and the idea was similar to the Broncos. The challenge was with Real Salt Lake is that by the time we made our intentions known publicly, meaning that we felt confident about the legal structure you just mentioned, the accounting, et cetera, that we had to put in place, the sale for Real Salt Lake was almost done, meaning that the people who ultimately bought it, there's a group headed up by a gentleman named Blitzer. Um, they already were basically finalizing the sale, and so when we announced our intention, we did ultimately get in contact with the MLS after our goal was announced, right, of trying to buy Real Salt Lake as a DAO, and they said, "Look, this is this is already a done deal. We're just finalizing the paperwork basically. And so in our estimation at that point, it was not ethical or responsible to raise any funds, and knowing what we were told by the MLS. And so we ultimately didn't ever make the attempt to raise funds at all, based on, frankly, the input that we got from the league. And I still to this day, obviously, we think that was the right thing to do. I mean, we maybe could have tried to raise money and complicate things, but I just don't know that that was in the best interest of the team or the fans at that point. So that was one lesson learned. But then on the other side, we learned a great deal with respect to, um, from a standpoint of getting the word out, and yeah, good vibes, yes. Getting the word out, and also the legal structure and what will and will not work, because no one has at this level and this scale tried to do this type of ownership structure for a sports team, at least not here in the United States. And so um, and so having that as, I wouldn't want to say that that's a trial run, but having that as an initial effort to really, hone a lot of the not only the tokenomics, but just the general economics of how this thing would play out was really important. And so we had a lot of good discussions, frankly, with folks from even like MIT, part of the Consensus Building Institute at MIT, one of them being a Nobel laureate, and getting their input and getting their take on how, voting rights must work, right? Because for a long time, frankly, we were considering something like quadratic voting, in relation to tokens. And so for folks who maybe, I would assume most people here, know what that looks like, but it's the idea that like Anna's super rich and I'm really poor. And let's say Anna, it costs 100 tokens to buy the Denver Broncos, and Anna puts up 80 of those tokens in theory, and I put up one, and then there are 19 other people who put up one each. In a traditional setting where if we were to give all of the power to one token, one vote or something like that, Anna could run the board, and really we have no say. If you do quadratic voting, it might cost, your first vote is one token, your second vote costs you 10 tokens, right? And things like that. We have looked at it and said, look, all of that needs to probably just go away. We don't want this to be based off of how much money somebody has. And so we've just defaulted to, frankly, the traditional cooperative structure, which is one person, one vote. And so with us, it's one wallet, one vote. And so if folks have more financial interest and contribution, there are potential benefits for that. But at the end of the day, from a democratic standpoint, we want every single person to have the same level of voice, same ability to provide input. I think there are a couple of questions in the chat, but I don't know if that helped answer the question, Anna.
Yes, for sure. Because yes, I understood that even in XDAO was created from the version 1. So
Yeah,
basically, yes, it's all good. It's live because we need to understand how it works to make it better and greater in the
for
future.
sure.
Yes, we can answer in the chat. I see that the
I think
question is, um,
I think there were two that I didn't address yet. Keep me honest here. One is the minimum amount needed to participate in the DAO, and the next is, are there different rules? Blah, 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 blah. Oh, is the team thinking of providing legal advice services? So I'll handle them in the order that they came in, if that's okay, with minimum amount to participate in the DAO. That's a great question, and I'll speak in fiat if that's okay, just because unfortunately the last week we probably can't. I don't know what's going to happen in a day, right? In terms of where ETH might be, for example. But with using traditional fiat US dollars, the way that we are looking at is that with a cooperative model, I mentioned REI. I'm a member of REI. The way that that works is that in order to become a member, you usually pay a very small one-time fee for life, to become a member, and that then is your membership number that you're given, and all of your participation with the cooperative is based off of that number. So we've taken that same concept and said we are making an NFT. Now, just to be clear, there is one major distinction with this NFT, and is the only NFT within our DAO structure that has this distinction. All other digital assets will operate in more traditional fashion, but this initial membership NFT will be soul bound to your wallet. And the reason we're doing that is we are not wanting to create a secondary marketplace for memberships, one, from a logistical standpoint, but also two, from a regulatory standpoint. And so, for example, Anna, if you become a member of the DAO and the price is right around $100 US, that's the price for the membership. And again, it's lifetime. It's not for every year or anything like that. It's once, that's it. That NFT is soul bound to your wallet, and then we are able to, from a whitelist standpoint for digital assets, from a standpoint of voting, et cetera, we are able to determine that this is in fact a wallet that is a member of the DAO, and that individual now has access to the benefits that come from being a member of the DAO. So for those in the United States, it's a lot like a Costco card. If you guys have ever, been to Costco, where you have to present your card at the door to get in, and that's how we are establishing that utility NFT. Once you are in, to answer the question now more directly of what is the minimum amount, there is no minimum amount per se once you are a member of the DAO that you must, quote, spend, but that initial membership fee and then a small piece for the for token ownership is going to be it. But we want it to be very much, hopefully, affordable to almost everyone who might have an interest to participate. That doesn't mean that everybody's going to have a huge stake, but we want everyone to feel as though they are given a fair shot to be a member of the DAO and a co-owner of a piece of the Denver Broncos. Does that help answer that question? If not, please, follow up in the chat.
So
The
as I
next one is
understand,
go.
and
Yeah.
yes, I just want to summarize. You just say that basically the people who want to be a part of the Denver Broncos DAO, they just need to purchase an NFT that will allow you to participate in voting and do some decisions. Yes, it is basically just a particular amount of money you need to spend for this, but you will spend it once, and you will have this NFT just forever until you will change your wallet, and you even can't send it to someone, even to your own another
Okay.
wallet. Yes, so just
Yes,
it will be
it
just
is
tied
soul
with
bound.
your wallet.
It is tied to that wallet. Yes. And so there will be other assets. There are other digital assets, including, tokens, NFTs, badges, and things of that nature within the DAO that will be, available to you as a member. And again, I want to be very clear that any of those any contribution raised from those assets go towards the purchase of the DAO. It doesn't go to me personally or anything like that. It's set aside. The one exception is we are going to create, or we're going to, within that ecosystem of the DAO, we're going to allow content creators to put up NFTs in hopes that other members of the DAO, so a member of the DAO could, post or mint a number of NFTs within the DAO itself. And if other members of the DAO were to acquire those NFTs, that creator, the artist, would receive a percentage of the proceeds. The remainder would go again towards the raise. It's not going towards a third party or anything like that. What we're trying to do is create an environment wherein the members of the DAO can put their talents to work and have that rewarded by fellow members. Here's a question: what if we need to transfer the NFT, like in the case of hacking or a wallet change? That's a great question, and there are a couple of ways we are trying to tackle that, because right now it is going to be a manual process, and I know that is not perfect, but that is the best way we can address that, because that's a great question, Checkmate. There is a DAO tooling option out there for like facial recognition, and we thought that probably doesn't fall in line with what we're trying to accomplish. So that was one of the options that at least we're exploring all of the choices. So right now it would be a situation where if there wasn't a wallet that was compromised, we'd probably have to burn the tokens. And Anna, you can speak with a great deal of authority on this, but burn the tokens of that wallet and then help that individual member transition to another wallet. So it is a manual process, but we felt as though that was a pain point that we would have to pay in order to stay in line with what our legal team is telling us is going to keep us in the clear when it comes to securities and regulatory compliance. And Checkmate's also asking about legal input from different countries. I think that I think that is something that we can probably talk about offline, because we obviously, in coordination with XDAO, want to provide as much as possible from a service standpoint. But there will be potentially, like, if there were another project in another country that someone was looking to do in similar fashion, we would have to familiarize ourselves with that particular jurisdiction and the laws regarding cooperatives and securities to see if exactly what we're doing will work on all fours. One thing we are doing, in addition to this, is we were contacted by a Native American tribe here in the United States in Northern California, and we are working with them on creating a legal entity. Because for those who may not be aware, Native American tribes are sovereign nations here in the United States, and so they are here in the United States. I say that geographically, right? They are geographically found within the borders of the continental United States primarily, as well as Alaska and Hawaii. But they are sovereign nations unto themselves. And so this tribe is working on a legal structure that is a cooperative DAO hybrid based on our help and input. And the hope is that this can become another region or another jurisdiction where people from all walks of life can register their DAO legally and have it operate in similar fashion to the way that we are setting ourselves up. So hopefully that helps a little bit, Checkmate. If you have specific questions or concerns, I would happily put you in touch with our legal team to see if they can address them, or put you in touch with someone who can, if that's fair. Other question.
Another question?
Distributing profits within the DAO members. Am I okay to address that, Anna, or did you want to go to the next question first?
I think we will go to the next question because it's the last question, and then we can go. Yeah.
We'll put a pin in that. Yep, we'll definitely address it.
So what powers will the stakeholders get in managing the team?
Great question. So the honest answer is we cannot guarantee anything just yet, right? Because we don't own a piece of the Denver Broncos. But I can tell you what we have in mind. The idea is not that the DAO chooses the starting lineup. For example, we do not want to be involved in the front office, right? Meaning the day-to-day interaction. Our hope is that the DAO also agrees, because ultimately this decision comes down to the DAO, right? But the perspective that we have right now is that it depends on how much money we're able to raise and what percentage we are able to own within the Denver Broncos ownership structure. Because if we, in theory, in a perfect world, are able to raise a healthy amount of money and own a significant percentage of the Denver Broncos, then it makes sense for the DAO to hold a number of seats, the board of directors. All of those seats obviously would be members who are elected by the DAO from their fellow members. People like us, meaning we view ourselves as stewards of the DAO, we are dedicated to not running for those positions. So it's not like we are going to try to occupy those positions whatsoever. It would be actual members of the DAO who come in from day 1 or day 50, right? Whenever they come in, they're able to run for those positions of influence within the DAO structure to make the DAO's voice heard at the level in which we're able to negotiate for that position. In the case that we are able to buy a very small percentage of the DAO, of the ownership structure, and we maybe aren't able to occupy 8 of the 10 seats at the board of directors table, our perspective on that angle is still to have the DAO's voice heard in any capacity that we can reasonably negotiate, and then allow for the DAO to decide what that might look like in the form of an individual or a group, or how that would really play out. Because obviously the fact that many of the members of the DAO will be geographically located here and able to attend things in person is great. But there also is the potential that members of the DAO are from all parts of the world, we hope, right? And so having physical attendance and some of those requirements may be limiting. And so, there is a little bit of variation that will potentially and most likely happen depending on, frankly, how much we are able to raise. And one other thing I will mention, there are a couple of other questions. So I'll stop talking on these side notes, but hopefully, does that answer the question? Or Anna, did you have a piece of that I didn't address?
I just wanted to ask you, for example, does it mean that if you raise like half of the sum you are going to raise, like for like 2 billion instead of 4 billion, does it mean you still participate in auction, for example?
Yeah, that's
As
a
I
great
understand.
question. And yeah, and so on that note, we are looking at it from a pragmatic standpoint, where if we are able to raise enough money to bid ourselves, we will do so. However, right now there are currently at least 5 bidders who have submitted non-binding but formal bids for the Denver Broncos. We are in touch with and communicating with a healthy percentage of those 5 groups. And our perspective is we go to them and we are talking to them and providing them with, we believe, a number of key benefits. And so far they've agreed, right? Which is that we can provide them with liquidity, which is helpful in the purchase of something as expensive as, the Denver Broncos. One backstory is, the Denver Broncos, I think, will likely sell for 4.5 to 5 billion, which is a lot of money, more than the initial anticipated 4 billion. The NFL only allows for an owner to take out $1 billion in debt towards the purchase of a team, and they do not allow the group to collateralize that billion with the team itself. So the most debt that a group can take on is 1 billion towards that 5 billion mark, and so you have to have, in theory, 4 billion liquid, right? So we provide liquidity. The second of the three things we provide is goodwill, right? For a potential future owner, having a portion of your ownership stake comprised of fans and players is the ultimate way to become the favorite person in town, we think, but also to really engender and endear yourself to the fan base and the players themselves, because having an ownership stake is exactly what every fan wants, right? And what every player wants, frankly, right? Players want to be loyal to their team, but their team needs to be loyal to them, right? Unfortunately, in a lot of sports scenarios, players are treated like commodities, and we're trying to change that in a lot of respects. And so goodwill is the second thing. The third thing that we bring is additional revenue streams for the team and for potentially the NFL in general, which is, with us, one of our efforts is to build a metaverse for Broncos country. So virtual Broncos country where people can attend the games in Mile High Stadium virtually, right? You have wearables, you have all of these other digital assets that a lot of folks on this call are very, very familiar with, but the NFL just isn't even close to having that type of marketplace developed. And so, by us putting that together for the members of the DAO, primarily to enjoy and to occupy and participate in, that's an additional group of revenue streams that right now just doesn't exist. So those are our kind of three main prongs when we are talking with these folks, and we think it's been fairly well received up to this point. So did I answer that question fully? I don't know. Hopefully I did.
I hope yes. I hope yes, and it's clear for
Yeah,
our listeners.
we're
And
Switzerland, right? We're Switzerland, basically. For all the folks who want to buy the Broncos, we say, look, this is the fan base. These are the players. We are Switzerland. We should be part of every negotiation to be a part of piece of the ownership. And if we can do it successfully and responsibly and ethically with the Broncos, maybe I'm a little too optimistic, but I think that becomes the norm for a lot of other professional teams and professional leagues to just see not only the financial benefit for them, but also just the true benefit of giving people what they deserve, right? The fans are the lifeblood, and the players. I mean, they're the actual, they're the ones who put their bodies on the line, literally, to make the team successful. They need to be rewarded like that.
um, I think we need to finish our discussion because it's it takes a lot of time, for your time, to participate in it.
Sorry, am I
You
talking too much?
can No, no,
Sorry.
no. Just because it's a timing, and I suppose he can answer questions. The guys who can go to your Discord server, by the Broncos Discord server, just learn in the website. We just put the link to the website into the description, so you can check everything by yourself also. And if you have any question, you can just go to the chat and communicate with the legal team, with Sean,
Yeah.
uh, personally. So, Sean, thank you very much. I personally really believe that we can do something big together, and because we prepared very good for it, you did very good job for it, and your team did very good job for it. I think we can make it possible. At least we can make it possible. But
It's going to happen, Anna. It might as well be all of us, right? If someone's going to do it, I'm sure folks on this call have seen, there are very, very wealthy billionaires who are now getting into the DAO space, right? Larry Ellison, you've got CO92, Class of 92, all the Manchester United legends. They're backed by a billionaire. They're looking into this space. And so, for the same reason, and hopefully I'm not offending anybody, but hope for the same reason that I will never call Facebook metaverse or meta or whatever they want to call themselves. I think it's just as vital for us as people to be the ones who drive these DAOs forward, not these major conglomerates or these independently wealthy individuals. There's nothing against them. Hey, man, they've made their money. Good on them. That's great. But I look at this as, we might lose the soul of the DAO if we just go down the same old Web 2 route and let is maybe not the right word, but allow for these same individuals to run the show. Like, that's the whole point of what we're trying to do. And it might be soapboxy, but we want each individual to be able to have their fistful of dirt. And we think we've found a way, to do that and to facilitate that. Web3 is the one, has provided the tooling, and we think we've provided kind of the business model and structure to enable that and facilitate it. And we really hope that we can have success, and then other people who are, again, like you, smarter, more creative, more intelligent than us, can come along and do this times 10 with so many other things, right? And so, yeah, that's our true hope, is that in 10 years from now, a DAO is a very common business model that people are very much not only familiar with, but comfortable with.
yes. And by the way, guys who just participate in our chat, go to our Discord also and claim your pop NFT, because you participate and you deserve it.
Yeah.
Sean, we can give you a pop NFT too if you want.
Of course, of course, absolutely. And one other thing on that note, in the next few weeks with XDAO, we will be making the announcements of some of these, some of the players, and going and hitting the news cycles and going live. And so we do want anyone who has questions. I'm sure there are questions here that I didn't address, and I apologize. It's not intentional. Please to reach out to us on our Discord, or on our DMs are open on Twitter. But also, to the extent that that you want, any help in spreading the word once we do actually go live is appreciated. And so between now and then, please, we want to address any questions or concerns that you guys have, and I would love to continue the conversation. In this environment with you, Anna, because you're awesome, but also in any other sort of forum where we can help pass the word along. And hopefully, if there are areas that we have missed, or if there's something we need to improve on, we want people to be able to tell us honestly and straightforward. You are not going to hurt our feelings. So if we need to improve on something, let us know, please. We want to do it. We want to provide the best product for the members of the DAO that we can.
That's perfect. Thank you, Sean. Have a nice rest of your day. And
Evening. It's late. It's
it's
almost
evening.
midnight for me. Well,
Yes,
actually, no.
it's
It's just 10
we have a
o'clock.
new
Not,
day. Yeah, yes,
yeah.
it's our new day. So yes, bye bye. See you next time, guys.
Okay. Thanks so
Bye,
much, Anna.
Sean.
Thanks all for tuning in. Really appreciate it.